Welcome back to the Arise interview, where we speak to the newsmakers as well as ordinary people doing extraordinary things around the world and featuring the voices at the heart of the stories. I'm Charles Aniagolu. Now, just over a year ago, the United Nations warned that Nigeria is under the grip of a housing crisis that's left the country ill-equipped to properly house tens of millions of people. In a nation where most inhabitants live on less than $2 a day and where the government lacks official data to develop an effective housing policy, existing housing programs are hardly making even the smallest dent in addressing the ever-growing housing need. It's resulted in the ballooning of informal settlements and shanty towns where, according to the UN, conditions are rather inhumane and amongst the most severe in the world. Well, a year later, things haven't gotten any better. Far from it, according to a new study. There are now additional challenges in trying to find accommodation inside cities like Abuja and Lagos, including sexism, tribalism, and having to put up more than a year's worth of rent in advance. For many, life has become even more impossible, especially for young people trying to build a career. Well, for more on this, I'm joined now from Lagos by the Executive Director of the Center for Gender Economics, Uchenna Idoko, and here in the Abuja studio by Okezie Obiefuna, who's an estate agent, surveyor and property developer. Thank you very much indeed to both of you for joining us. Let me ask you that particular question. How difficult do you think it is finding a place to live or rent in a place like Lagos, particularly for a single woman?
There's nothing that it's easy to come by generally in things about life. So getting a house isn't also not easy. However, when anybody needs an accommodation, there are professionals to talk to. When you don't go to the professionals and you go to the roadside agents, there are a lot of implications to that. A professional will profile a prospective tenant and know exactly what the person intends to get, how he intends or she intends to pay subsequent rent, where she was or he was living before now, and the essence of having this accommodation around.
Well, I don't think that's the point. The point really is that there's a new study that's come out. It's been authenticated by a lot of people that there is a lot of prejudice and discrimination in the housing business. That particularly for young women, these are UN figures, these are new statistics that are coming out, particularly for young women, when they go to a young single woman, for example, because of the prejudices that are inherent in Nigerian society, when they often go to rent a place or whatever, they're often discriminated against because people say, well, you're a single woman, we don't know if you're a sex worker, we don't know what's going to happen, blah, blah, why aren't you married, and all that kind of stuff.
It is neither here nor there, because even with a study, people tend to remove the fact that we have a multicultural society in Nigeria. Our culture affects everything.
Okay, just stand by. Let me go to Lagos because I'm told that our guest in Lagos there, Uchenna Idoko, can now hear me. I apologize, but I'm not entirely sure what's going on with sound systems for the entire day. But thank you for your patience and for joining us. How difficult is it finding a place to live or rent in a city like Lagos, particularly for a single young woman today?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's very difficult to find a place to live in Lagos for all young people, but especially very difficult for young women. And it's very difficult for young women because of the gender stereotypes we have in the kind of socialization we have in Nigeria. Every young woman is seen as a woman that is promiscuous. So landlords are not ready to rent to them, whatever their status may be. They have an array of reasons why they wouldn't rent to them. So it's a very difficult search for young women. For young men, it's easier. In fact, some landlords go out looking for young men to rent their apartment because they feel the young men, they don't have children running around. They are not like the young ladies. And because of the socialization they also have, which is patriarchal, so men is key. So the men should get into the house and not the women. So it's a very difficult operation for women to do, especially the young women.
Right. So in that context, what happens to women who aren't married or who simply don't want to get married? I mean, how much of a burden or a problem is that for them?
For the women that want to marry?
What happens to women who aren't married or who simply don't want to get married and want to go out and get accommodation?
Well, it's a double challenge for them. It's they keep at it. They keep searching for, and they keep being turned down. From a lot of experience shared around me, it's sometimes they use informal means to appease to the landlords, to get letters from their office, to show they're not sex workers, to show they won't turn their houses to brothels. Some of the landlords even dehumanize them, make them sign some consent forms, some consent letters to say, oh, henceforth you'll be coming back by 10 p.m. If you won't come back by 10 p.m., then you'll call me or you'll call the security man, all manner of conditionalities. So it's a very difficult search for women that aren't married and are not ready to get married, because I mean, marriage should be a personal thing. It's not meant to be dictated by landlords, but that is what we see in Lagos. So for some of them that even forced to bring an uncle as a guardian to shorty for them, to bring a co-worker, a cousin, a brother, just to get a house that you can't pay for.
Well, I have to say that sounds absolutely outrageous and unacceptable. And we were talking about this with you before she came on, and you sounded like you hadn't heard about it.
I've heard. I'm a practicing estate surveyor and valuer. I've been 20 years in this practice. And I will tell you, first of all, it is not good to stereotype every landlords together. Now, a lot of young ladies who are working, who have genuine means of income, they get houses wherever they wish to get houses. However, it is also difficult to distinguish between where the people don't give out houses, especially when the landlords manage these houses themselves. That's why the issue of professionalism coming. When an estate surveyor is managing a house, it's different from when a landlord is managing the house himself. Because if you approach the estate surveyor, the person profiles you, takes you as a prospective tenant, knows exactly how you're going to continue making payment. The most important thing for a landlord that builds a house is not to leave it vacant, is to rent it out. However, in some situations too, some landlords that are managing by themselves have some terrible experiences with some single ladies, even young men. It's not about just single ladies are not supposed to be stereotyped about this issue. It's about even young men. At a particular point in time in Abuja here, there are people from a section of the country that wouldn't want to rent a house from another section of the country.
That's actually a very good point, because I was going to ask you that I understand that tribalism has also become a big problem.
It has become an issue. However, if you're a competent professional and your landlord or your client tells you that I don't want to take a Christian or a Muslim, you don't go about telling your client or your tenants this is what he says. You don't know how to manage it, because if you put it out there, it becomes part of the data that someone brings up to the table and says tribalism affects housing. Like in every other thing in Nigeria, tribalism sets into every other thing in Nigeria, including everything government policies. So it's not limited to housing. However, it is a problem that has emerged.
That's a very good point. So let me bring you back in, Ms. Idoko there in Lagos. I mean, is there a housing authority that you can go to who can take up such cases if it becomes an issue? I mean, I know, for instance, that you've got the Public Complaints Commission. We've had their chairman here in the studio. I mean, can such agencies of government be trusted to come and help to sort of clamp down on such practices that are clearly wrong?
Okay, if the much I heard, you're asking if agencies of government can help to stop such practices?
Yes, I'm asking you, is there a housing authority that you can go to? I mean, you've got the Public Complaints Commission, for example. Is that somewhere that you can go and hope that they will take up your case if you're discriminated against in housing?
Okay. Okay, I'll try to respond to the much I heard. But before I do that, I want to respond to what my brother in Abuja studio is talking about. It's a bit elitist for us women to keep going, or young men or young women at a particular strata. Like when I finished my NYSC, for example, I was living in Abuja and I needed a house. I couldn't afford to go to real estate agents to pay them, their certain agency fee, and then get to a landlord. So for people that accesses such services, it's a different ball game, and it's not a good number of us out there, young people, both male and female, that can access that. And when it comes to issue of authorities, I think the major deal there is to please about legislations that we have and or policies, so any form of affirmative action. I think if you go to the housing state authority, so many of them will refer you back that such houses are in the hands of a private sector, in the hands of private. So there's no, I've not heard about any kind of law that anyone can access with such agencies. Of course, they can step up if you cry out loud, but I ideally feel there should be a proper policy to respond to such studies, or some form of affirmative action on the short run. And laws like the Gender Equality Bill that has been in the Senate for as long as the 7th set should be passed right now. And in those tenets, have some form of law that people can access. Because I think in our penal code, you don't have such covering to assess when you have issues like that. And that's why perpetrators keep doing what they are doing. So
I want to thank you very much, Uchenna Idoko, who is the Executive Director of the Center for Gender Economics, and she was talking to me from Lagos there. Do stay with us. We'll come back to you in a minute. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our chat about the housing crunch in Nigeria and the challenge of finding rental accommodation. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Aniagolu. Now, according to many people in Nigeria looking for accommodation, landlords in cities like Lagos and Abuja now openly practice sexism and tribalism. Many unmarried women are finding it almost impossible to rent a place to live, especially when you have to walk in to see the landlord or the estate agent. It's all got to do with Nigeria's patriarchal structure, which pretty much makes people view marriage as one of the most important social customs, one that awards women both respect and status. But slowly, technology is helping to bring change, at least in the housing market. A firm called Muster has created a housing app that allows people to rent out their rooms in major cities like Lagos and Abuja. The firm says it's working flat out to try to change the practice of sexism and tribalism and to eliminate prejudice and discrimination in Nigeria's housing market. And the co-founder of the housing app Muster is Idoko Okezie, and he joins me now from Lagos. And the estate agent, surveyor and property developer, of course, Okezie Obiefuna, is still with me in the studio here in Abuja. Thank you very much indeed, Ugo, for joining us. So first of all, tell us how your housing app Muster works and how you think it can be used to eliminate prejudice and discrimination in the housing market.
Thank you, first off, for having me. Muster is essentially giving young people access to affordable housing, right? Through flexible contracts, flexible payments, and generally an access to a very diverse and vibrant community. I must state that it's really unfortunate that in 2021, women still have to go through some of these problems, biases, and prejudice, because women on Muster haven't had to deal with this problem since 2018, which is when we launched. So there's a lot of education that's going into the work that we do. Homeowners that we speak with or homeowners that we work with typically cannot have these prejudices or don't have these prejudices. And in instances where we find people or people want to list their rooms on the platform and they have these biases, we first educate narrative or flat out just don't allow it on the platform.
Right. I mean, so just tell us a bit more, because I mean, I'm wondering how your housing app Muster deals with cases where people actually experience prejudice and discrimination. I mean, are you saying that it doesn't happen at all, or that you've got mechanisms to deal with it if it does happen?
100% it doesn't happen at all. And this is particularly because of the type of company that we've built. There is a very, very strict vetting process for the type of homes that come on to the platform. So we've never had any issues, and we're not going to have any issues of prejudices or biases when it comes to people finding homes. In fact, one of the things that we've done is we've reduced the time it takes to finding a home from 6 to 12 months to just under 24 hours. That's the type of impact that we've made in society today.
But you're certainly aware of the fact that these prejudices and discriminations exist, are you?
Yes, I am 100%. I'm aware that it exists. In fact, a good number of the women, particularly women, because they are the biggest. I know the estate agents in studio said it's kind of equal, but actually women are mostly affected by these biases. A lot of the women on our platform today came to us because they were not able to find housing the traditional way, because either they are not married or they don't have a certain type of job or they're from a certain type of tribe. I'm aware that it happens, and we're doing the work to change the narrative and ensure that such things don't occur generally.
Okay, well, it's a good thing that technology is actually stepping in. But let me bring you in, Okezie, there, because of course, I mean, beyond what they're saying, and I hope you don't feel like everybody is leaping down on you from a great height, but beyond what they're saying, Nigeria is, of course, Africa's most populous nation, and more people are moving to the cities to find jobs. UN data that I saw shows that the population of Lagos is increasing by 77 people every hour. That's an astonishing figure. So even without sexism and tribalism and all the rest of it, I mean, it must be very difficult indeed to find a home in a place like Lagos.
Thank you very much for coming down to what I had said initially. Meanwhile, let me also correct an impression. I'm not an estate agent. I'm an estate surveyor and valuer.
Right.
And a developer, not an agent. However, agency is part of estate surveying too.
Right.
Then back to what you were saying. In Lagos, Lagos is saturated. You know now that every other time you see people feeling to get expanding from Lagos State to Ogun to get more houses. The houses are already there. People are building more houses, and population is coming into Lagos every other time. So it is naturally difficult to get a house. That's one. Number two, for people that are looking for house, I'm not saying that these things don't happen, this issue of sexism don't happen to women, to girls, single girls. I'm saying that it is not just them. It happens to young people, men and women. However, it happens to the women more. The issue is that it is not something that is related to housing alone. It doesn't have to do with housing alone. This is the culture, this is the nation that we find ourselves in.
Yeah, but obviously we're talking about housing.
That's what I'm saying. So everything happens to, it cuts across every strata of the economy.
It's a little bit difficult if you can't find accommodation. You've got to have somewhere to live before you start looking at other things.
Thank you very much. Like she was talking about, the last speaker was talking about when she finished youth service. If you finished your youth service, it is difficult to get an accommodation where you can get a house. So what some people do is that 2 or 3 people come together to get an accommodation, to start staying, get jobs and all that. Unless your background it's telling another story, or you have a lucrative job immediately after your youth service. But if you're starting at that level, there are certain places that you wouldn't go and look for houses.
Right.
So these things are not things that should be put in perspective. Okay. At the same time, too, briefly, there are people that they give money to, and they run away with this money. Nobody's talking about that.
Right, okay. Well, let me bring you in, Ugo. We've got a couple of minutes. It took a while to sort of get through to you there, so my apologies. But, I mean, we keep hearing, you've been in this business, and we've established that there is prejudice, there's discrimination, women are having problems finding accommodation, there's also tribalism and all that sort of thing. But apps like yours, Muster, are trying to do something about it using technology to eliminate that. But we also, another crucial problem is simply the availability of accommodation, particularly for lower income people starting off on the career ladder. We keep hearing that successive governments are launching sort of report after report, looking at how promising, promising affordable housing. Is it that they never deliver, or is it that rapid urbanization has brought pressures on infrastructure and housing? And we've got a minute.
100%. I do think that rapid urbanization has affected like the housing market generally. So this is not peculiar to Nigeria. But it's also important to note that a lot of property developers aren't building fit for purpose housing, right? Mr. Okezie would agree that a lot of these properties scattered across the state, let me use Lagos for example, some of them are actually unoccupied, simply because they're just not fit for purpose. Developers are not using data to build these houses. My company has collected data that can advise property developers on exactly what to build and where to build. If you have a demography of young people between the ages of 20 to 28, who are probably unmarried, there's absolutely no reason why you should be building.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I know this is going to be a topic that will be discussed going forward. Idoko Okezie is the co-founder of the housing app Muster. He's joined me there from Lagos, and here in the studio, the estate surveyor and property developer Okezie Obiefuna. Thank you very much indeed to both of you. That's it for this edition of the Arise interview. Join us again tomorrow. From me and the entire team here in Abuja and Lagos, bye-bye, and thank you for watching.